Hello and welcome to What's in the Night Sky for July 2021. I'm Hayley, and this month I'm going to be talking to you about noctilucent clouds, the planet Saturn, and our constellation of the month, which is Cygnus, the Swan. Let's begin by talking about noctilucent clouds. The word noctilucent means night shining, so these are night shining clouds, and they are very high altitude ice clouds that exist on the edge of space, and when the sun is just below the horizon, sunlight reflects from the ice crystals, making those clouds visible. This is prime noctilucent cloud season, so they're a phenomenon that appears in the summer, and to spot them, what you need to do is take a look at your northwestern horizon around an hour and a half, 2 hours after sunset, and look low above the horizon to see if you can spot these often quite dramatic blue luminous clouds that appear in the sky. Alternatively, you can look to your northeastern horizon a similar amount of time before sunrise. So here we are, you can see that I'm on the 1st of July looking to the northwest, and I'm at about 11 p.m. The sun will be setting at the beginning of July around 9:30, so anytime from around 11 o'clock up until about midnight, have a look to see if you can see these night shining clouds, and they're very photogenic, so if you have a camera handy you can try snapping a photograph of those as well. Let's take a look at some notable events that will be happening through the month of July now. I'm going to start by taking us to the 6th, around 3 o'clock in the morning, early hours of the morning on the 6th. I'm going to take us round to the east-northeast, quite low to the horizon. You will see the moon, and we have a thin crescent moon waning towards new moon, which occurs on the 8th this month, and quite close to the Pleiades star cluster. So a nice chance to see a thin moon and the Seven Sisters star cluster together on the 6th. If we go forward a couple of days to the 8th, we're going to stay with the moon, and you can see that 3 o'clock in the morning the moon isn't visible yet, so I'm going to just move time on a little. You can see we have a very thin crescent moon rising here, and the planet Mercury. Bearing in mind that new moon occurs on the 9th, so this is a very thin crescent, and you're going to need to try to pick it out of the morning twilight because we're quite close to sunrise here. Be careful that you're not trying to look for this after the sun has risen, because you don't want to be accidentally looking at the sun and damaging your eyes. So a thin crescent moon and the planet Mercury. If you've got a clear sky and a nice clear northeastern horizon on the morning of the 8th, it's a good opportunity to try and spot those two objects together. If we move now to the 11th of July and go into the evening, so we just want to be just after sunset here, so I'm going to take us to around 9:45 in the evening, and if I zoom out and move us around to the northwest, you can see that as the sun is setting we have a thin crescent moon just emerging after new, so we've got a thin waxing crescent, the planet Venus and also the planet Mars all together. Now we're only just after sunset here, so these are going to be tricky to pick out. Have a look and see if you can spot that crescent moon or Venus. If you get your binoculars, if you have a pair of binoculars, and train those on Venus, then that will help you to see if you can pick out the disk of planet Mars as well. It might be worth waiting until it gets a little bit darker, but as we get darker they're all getting lower, so it will depend on how clear a horizon you have as to how late you can let it get before you lose those and you can't see them anymore. If we go through the 12th, you can see the way that the position of the moon is changing, and the 13th as the moon is moving away. So a chance to see the crescent moon, Venus and Mars all together in the early evening on the 11th, 12th and 13th of July. Let's go to the 23rd of the month now and take a look at the full moon. I'm just going to take us to a part of the night that's a bit darker, move us around to the south, and you can see, if we zoom in, we have the full moon. And the full moon this month is quite close to the planets Jupiter and Saturn, so a nice opportunity to see the moon along with those two gas giants. And if we go to the 24th, so just go forward by one day, you can see that the moon actually gets quite close to Saturn over here. Take a closer look at the planet Saturn. Saturn reaches opposition in early August, so July and August are great times to be observing Saturn. When a planet is around the time of opposition, that is a favourable time for observing, because the planet tends to appear larger and brighter than it does at other times. If we take a look at how Saturn might appear through a telescope, even with a small telescope, you will be able to make out that Saturn is a planet with rings. With a pair of binoculars, you might struggle to see that there are rings there, but you may see a bulging on either side of the planet, indicating that the rings are there. With a small telescope, you will be able to see the moon Titan, Saturn's largest moon. If you have a telescope that is around 6 inches in diameter or larger, then you may be able to see some of these other moons that are depicted here on my screen. So Saturn has over 60 moons altogether, and there are 7 of them that you may be able to pick out with an amateur telescope, Titan being the biggest and the easiest to spot. Saturn was visited by a space probe called Cassini Huygens, which consisted of an orbiter and a lander. And the lander, which was the Huygens part of the probe, landed on the moon Titan. And Titan is a really interesting world in its own right, because it's actually quite similar to the Earth in many ways. You may be able to spot Titan even with a pair of binoculars, but certainly with a small telescope. The mission, when it visited Titan, it was the first to land on a world in the outer solar system and the first to sample an extraterrestrial ocean. Titan has rivers, lakes and seas on the surface, just like we do here on Earth. But these rivers, lakes and seas are not made of water. They are made of hydrocarbons like methane. Some of the seas are hundreds of miles wide. Titan also has a nitrogen atmosphere similar to the Earth, but at a higher pressure. If you were an astronaut visiting Titan, you wouldn't need to wear a spacesuit. You'd need to wear an oxygen mask, and you'd definitely need some cold protection. Titan would be a bit nippy at around minus 180 degrees. It has a gravity similar to Earth's moon, and it has a thick crust made out of water ice. And astronomers believe that below that thick crust of water ice, there may be a subsurface water ocean which could harbour life. So when you are viewing Saturn through your binoculars or your telescope this month, and you take a look at the planet Titan, you could be looking at somewhere that harbours microbial life, and perhaps we will send future missions to Titan to try to answer that question. Back to the planet itself. If you have a slightly larger telescope, something 6 inches in diameter or bigger, then you may be able to start to see some detail on the planet. You might notice that the disk has brighter patches, it hints at the turbulent weather that occurs on Saturn. You may be able to see this division between the rings. This is called the Cassini Division. So the Cassini probe that we were talking about was named after the astronomer Giovanni Cassini, who discovered this division between the A and the B rings. And the division is caused by gravitational effects from the moon Mimas. There are other divisions between the rings as well that you would need a much larger instrument to be able to pick out. But amateur astronomers often can see the Cassini division if you have a big enough telescope and you get good seeing conditions on the day as well. Let's take a look at our constellation of the month now, which is Cygnus the Swan. And if I zoom out, you can see the swan shape of Cygnus flying through the Milky Way, or swimming through the river of the Milky Way. If we put the art on. You can see that Cygnus is depicted as a swan. And there are lots of stories about Cygnus. One is that the swan is Orpheus, the Greek hero, who was transformed into a swan after death and placed next to his harp, which is depicted here in the constellation of Lyra. It's known to the Chinese as a bridge crossing the celestial river of the Milky Way. And Cygnus, its brightest star, Deneb, Deneb comes from the Arabic word for tail, so in the tail of the swan, and it's a blue-white supergiant, 60,000 times more luminous than the sun, and is expected to go supernova sometime in the next few million years, which in astronomical terms is quite soon. And Deneb forms the asterism of the summer triangle with Altair and Vega. So if I take the art off so you can see that, but I haven't taken the ground off, so let's sort that out. So here we go. So we've got Deneb, Altair and Vega. These three stars form the summer triangle, and they are all bright stars. So the summer triangle is a very prominent asterism in the night sky. Even if you are living in an area that is fairly light polluted, you should still be able to pick out the summer triangle, and then it's a nice way to help you learn some of the summer constellations, because you're picking out three stars, each one appearing in a different constellation in the summer sky. Let's finish by taking a look at the ISS. So there are a few ISS passes that you could have a go at spotting during July. And one that should be relatively good is July the 6th in the early hours of the morning, just after 2:30. I think around 2:36 we should see the ISS appear. So let's just speed up time and wait for the ISS to appear. And here it is. Whoops. There we go. So there goes the ISS. So look towards the western part of the sky around 2:36 in the morning on the 6th of July to spot the ISS going over. And if you would like to find out other passes for the ISS, then you can visit the Spot the Station website to find out when the ISS will be passing over for your location. That's all we have time for this month. I will be back next month to talk about what you can see in the night sky in August.